All righty, ladies and gentlemen, boys and girls, good evening. Welcome to Jacked Up, October 8, 2024, on the heels of the Pittsburgh Steelers' second loss of the season in as many weeks, in dramatic fashion, and probably while you were sleeping on WTOV 9. Sunday Night Football delayed, of course, due to inclement weather in the Pittsburgh area. I told people after it happened, it was kind of like if the game started when the second half should have started. It was about an hour and 30-minute weather delay due to a ton of rain and inclement weather in the Pittsburgh area, and it delayed a 20-17 loss to the Dallas Cowboys by about an hour and a half. Game ended just around 1 a.m. Disappointing fashion, disappointing that we all had to stay up late and go through that as Steelers fans and people that cover the team. But the Steelers now 3-2 on the season. We're going to talk about that. We're going to talk about what this does for Pittsburgh moving forward. We'll dissect it. We'll talk a little bit about some of the things that transpired in the game. One of those things having to do with George Pickens, the other Justin Fields. You're going to hear from head coach Mike Tomlin. You're going to hear from Justin Fields fresh from the postgame. You might have already seen the clips, but I want to talk a little bit about what each person said, how they said it, what it means for this team. Some very interesting stuff said in the postgame pressers after Sunday's loss to the Cowboys. We'll start with the quarterback position for Pittsburgh. Justin Fields, obviously not a great outing, probably his worst as the Steelers starting quarterback for the first 5 games of the season. Fields, the former Buckeye, 15 of 27, a $131 through the air, 2 touchdowns, a QBR of under 40, 35.5. It was his worst start so far with the Steelers. I think we can all agree upon that. And it brings up a couple of questions. The first one, the biggest one, is what does this do for him under center moving forward? Because Russell Wilson telling NBC during the broadcast on Sunday night that he should be good and he should be ready to go for this Sunday in Las Vegas. Now, if that's the case, if Russell Wilson is given the green light for full participation, 100% health, do you give the ball to him? Or does Russ become second string to Fields? What we've seen since the start of the season is Russ being the emergency third quarterback, third behind Kyle Allen. Now, we saw Kyle Allen enter the ballgame when Justin Fields had a little bit of a concussion scare, completed a pass for almost 20 yards, but they didn't go to Russ in that situation, obviously, because he was the emergency third quarterback due to health. Now, if Russ is ready to go, do you look at Fields' performance on Sunday and say, you know what, let's see what we have in Russell Wilson? My gut, like if it were me, if I were Mike Tomlin, if I were in charge of making this decision, I would hold it off. Mainly because I don't like the limbo of back and forth between Fields to Wilson back to Fields. Number one, who's to say that Russ gets thrown in there, right? And boom, automatically goes down again because the health has been an issue. The calf has been an issue for Russell Wilson to start the season. And then number two, if Russ struggles, then you go back to Fields. What does that do for Justin's confidence being shaken back and forth? Because if they do turn it over to Russell Wilson, if I'm Justin Fields, I say in the back of my mind, okay, obviously I didn't play well enough in the last 2 games. We lost to keep my job or to keep the starting job, and they go to Russ. Now, what does that do for my confidence moving forward? Once you figure out, A, if Russ gets hurt, B, if he struggles, then you go back to Fields. Is it going to be the same sort of confidence? Is it going to be the same Justin Fields that we've seen? And he's shown flashes. He's shown the ability to be a very good quarterback in this offense, which we'll talk about. That's a whole other discussion. After we take a Trinity timeout, I'm going to talk a little bit about the offense. So to me, I don't think they should go to Russell Wilson if Russell Wilson is healthy this week. On the other hand, though, I think that if Russ is healthy, they will turn the ball over to number 3 this week. Why? Look at the way that Mike Tomlin has treated Russell's health and his availability based on that since the start of the season. Seems like he's had prepared statements talking about Russell Wilson's availability and playing it by ear throughout the week. We'll see where he's at. We'll see where he's at. That all while going on, the Steelers are 3-0. They rattled 3 wins to start the regular season. And it seemed like for the moment, Justin Fields was the hot hand, like Mason Rudolph was the hot hand going into last year's playoff loss to Buffalo. Now, if you listen to me on 93.7 The Fan in Pittsburgh, last time I was on, start of the show, I clamored for Justin Fields being the hot hand. Despite the loss in Indianapolis, statistically, it was his best performance. So Justin Fields, to me at that moment, was the hot hand. I don't think I'd call him that anymore. And, it's a week-by-week business in the National Football League. It's a what have you done for me lately business. And Justin Fields is coming off of his worst start in a Steelers uniform, which is why I think the Steelers, because they didn't invest financially into Russell Wilson, they invested publicly into Russell Wilson. And what I mean by that is that Russ brings the attention. Russ brings the glamour. Russ brings being married to a hip-hop star in Sierra and a very public and very relevant lifestyle. All of that. They invested publicly into Russell Wilson, if that makes sense. They didn't bring him in to have him ride the pine. They had brought him in here to ultimately compete with Kenny Pickett and probably win the starting job if Kenny Pickett didn't request a trade out of town. And when that happened, you trade for a quarterback for a 6th round pick, no matter who it is. If it's Patrick Mahomes, it's a different story, but that would never happen. They traded a 6th round pick, a conditional 6th rounder for Justin Fields. At that point, Russell Wilson was the clear-cut starter. Russell Wilson had the pole position to be the starting quarterback. And Mike Tomlin had talked about that time and time again. He had the pole position when Fields was brought in. He had the pole position in OTAs, and he still had pole position in training camp while Fields was getting those first-team reps because Russ got hurt pushing a blocking sled in the physical fitness test before training camp even started. So because of that, I think Russ gets the ball when he is deemed healthy. And it seems like that we're trending in that direction this week in Las Vegas. Matchup scares me a little bit. Mainly because Gardner Minshew beat the Steelers you-know-what last year as a member of the Indianapolis Colts, 30-13. Devontae Adams, for the moment, is still on the Raiders roster. I don't see a trade happening before Sunday. I mean, I'm no NFL insider. It might. So that matchup problem scares me a little bit. You look at what Jalen Tolbert did for Dallas. 87 yards, led the team in catches, led the team in yards. CeeDee Lamb was schemed open a couple of times, and he's one of the most talented receivers in football, like Adams is. So the Steelers secondary kind of showed its exposure ability, if that makes sense in a phrase, that despite them playing well to start the season, and they had 2 interceptions on Sunday against Prescott with Joey Porter Jr. and Dante Jackson, another one. The secondary has holes. The Steelers defense has holes. I mean, 9 for 15 on 3rd down were the Dallas Cowboys against the Steelers defense. Patrick Queen has underperformed. TJ Watt is going to be dealt with a big-time burden, assuming Alex Highsmith is still dealing with a groin, assuming that Nick Herbig will be sidelined again with the injury he suffered against the Cowboys, and DeMarvin Leal, the 3rd-string edge rusher, or I guess the 4th edge rusher on the roster behind Watt, Highsmith, Herbig, then Leal, he gets banged up. At the end of the game, it's TJ Watt and Jeremiah Moon. Problem. Flip it. Max Crosby. Problem. Against a Steelers offensive tackle tandem of Dan Moore Jr. and Broderick Jones that has shown weakness at the start of this season, especially Broderick Jones. Isaac Seumalo struggled on Sunday against Dallas. He's a veteran player on the older side, still very good, but missed the first 4 games of the season due to a pectoral injury. He'll only get better. He's just rusty, I would have to assume. And then the rookie tandem at center and guard that looks like it's here to stay between Zach Frazier and Mason McCormick will only get better as well. We'll talk a little bit about the offensive line. We'll talk a little bit about some things on offense. I have my offensive problem power rankings for the Steelers that I want to go over. We will do that in a moment, but first, we will take a Trinity timeout. You're watching Jacked Up on the WTOV 9 YouTube page.
The future looks good. The future looks good to me. The future looks good.
Timeouts presented by Trinity Health System. Thanks to the folks down at Trinity. Bordas and Bordas Friday Night Rivals this week. A reminder, Union Local, St. Clairsville at UL, both Belmont County rivals, both undefeated, live on Comet at 7 p.m. All right, we're talking Steelers. We're talking about the offense struggling. You know, we spoke about the defense being able to get picked apart a little bit, especially on third down. The Steelers defense 9 for 15 on third downs. Against Dallas. Offensively, and you scratch your head because, you know, you think that when Matt Canada was handed his walking papers and you bring a guy in like Arthur Smith, who is an NFL offensive mind, is an NFL offensive coordinator, had done it at a very, very high level before. There are a couple of situations where the play calling is suspect, not as much as it was under Matt Canada. A toss play on third down against Dallas comes to mind in the first half that really I had my head scratching at. And that's maybe only been once a game so far this season, maybe a little less than that on average. The play calling I'm having no issue with. The execution and the way the game has been played is what I'm having problems with. And I think that comes from above Arthur Smith. I think Mike Tomlin loves, for whatever reason, loves to be conservative as hell on offense. Loves to have a quarterback not turn the ball over and do the bare minimum and win a football game. Since Ben Roethlisberger retired, since Ben Roethlisberger and one of the best quarterbacks in NFL history retired from your franchise, Mike Tomlin has prided himself, it seems like, on taking the importance of good quarterback play away from winning a football game, de-emphasizing the quarterback position, which is just pissed me off to no end. Because you have to have dynamic quarterback play to win football games in the NFL in 2024. I.e. Patrick Mahomes, i.e. Josh Allen, Jalen Hurts, Joe Burrow. The list goes on and on and on. Why the Cleveland Browns stink right now is because Deshaun Watson isn't the player he once was. Is the Browns roster necessarily bad? No, but Deshaun Watson stinks. Therefore, Browns 1-4. Justin Fields has the ability to be a dynamic quarterback in the NFL. Turn him loose. What do you have to lose at this point? And in the grand scheme of things, what do you have to lose, period? Is this roster good enough to beat Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs and make a Super Bowl? No. So turn Justin Fields loose and see what you have in the kid. See what you have in him and make the decision whether or not he's worth signing to an extension in the offseason and having a little bit of consistency at the quarterback position. That is the overlaying issue with the offense. And we're going to break down a couple of problem areas, which I call my problem power rankings on offense. First, number one, the run game. Najee's averaging 3.5 yards a carry, actually less than 3.5 yards a carry, 3.3 YPC to start the season. No Jaylen Warren. And you can only ask the quarterback to do so much in the running game before you get him killed. Justin Fields, a dynamic runner, yes, but the Steelers aren't in a position, nor should any team in football, with the exception of the Ravens, and it can be dangerous at times, make your quarterback the focal point of your run offense. That's why the Ravens brought in Derrick Henry to complement Lamar Jackson in that run game. Now, no Jaylen Warren has attributed to that, and time again now, we are further being shown that Najee Harris is not an every down back. And by that standard, was not worth the first round selection a couple of years ago. But you couple his running style with the ability of Jaylen Warren to hit the home run ball, it can be pretty darn good. We saw that last year post Matt Canada with Eddie Faulkner, the running backs coach, who, by the way, is still on staff coordinating the offense, and Mike Sullivan still on staff calling the plays. So the run game and its performance to start the season is the number one on my offensive problem power rankings. Number two, the offensive line. And it is a problem, yes, and you can't really help it because of the injuries. Obviously, Broderick Jones dealing with an elbow in the preseason that seems to kind of nagged him. And then the big ones, Nate Herbig, James Daniels, and Troy Fautanu, all gone for this season. That sucks. And it's going to take this offensive line time to get better, especially, and we talked about it before the Trinity timeout, Zach Frazier, Mason McCormick, they're only going to get better as rookies in this league. Zach Frazier, I think, has exceeded expectations to this point so far. He might have the opportunity to be a Pro Bowl center. We'll see. That could be asking a lot out of a rookie, and it's still early. But he's only going to get better, and so is Mason McCormick. And Isaac Seumalo will continue to dust off the rust and be a good mentor for two rookie interior offensive linemen. So I think that problem will progress, or regress, I should say. It'll get itself fixed as the offensive line, knock on wood, stays injury-free from here on out. And number three, and you might even be able to make a case for this being higher on the offensive line power rankings of problems. I haven't rehearsed that enough in my head. George Pickens, 3 receptions for 26 yards in the loss to Dallas. But the thing that stuck out the most is him not playing. He only played in 34 snaps. This is, for the most part, the only competent wide receiver you have on your roster. The receiving core stinks. That, as I sit here and talk out loud, might even be more of a problem than the offensive line and maybe even the run game. I had the run game number one because that is what an Arthur Smith offense is predicated on, running the football. And if you can't do that, which the Steelers haven't been able to do well, that's why I have that number one. But the receiving core has shown that it's not good enough and should be relying heavily on George Pickens. He only played in 34 of the 58 snaps. Lollygagging routes, not finishing routes, looking disinterested and miserable on the sideline. So you see all that and you say to yourself, is he in the doghouse? Are there issues with George Pickens and the team in the locker room with the coaching staff? Mike Tomlin was asked about that post-game after the loss to Dallas on Sunday and had one of the most hilarious responses to a question in a press conference I've ever heard. We'll show you.
You know, we just wanted to kind of minimize his reps in an effort to get more productivity. You know, we just trying to rep manage in terms of the totality of the big picture. He wasn't less of a focal point in terms of our intentions of what we wanted to do offensively, but we did want to cut his reps a little bit in an effort to get higher quality play, just in general.
To quote the great Tim Robinson from the Netflix show, I Think You Should Leave. You sure about that? You sure about that, Mike? On what planet, in what universe, in what stratosphere does it make any sense for the most dynamic player and the most big play capable player on your offense to be sitting out plays to maximize productivity? When do you ever see Justin Jefferson in Minnesota sitting out to maximize what he can do on a football field? When do you ever see it in Cincinnati with Jamar Chase? When do you ever see it in Kansas City with Travis Kelce or Isaiah Pacheco? Or when do you see it in Buffalo with James Cook or Keon Coleman? In Houston with Stephon Diggs? The list goes on and on. Is George Pickens as good as some of those players? No, but he's the best option that this offense has as far as playmaking ability goes. We've seen the one-handed catches. We've seen his ability to bring in footballs and stay in bounds and make big plays happen. Why does that make sense? Hey, guess what? It doesn't, Mike. So quit the BS. He's not going to come out and say that George is in the doghouse, but that doesn't make a lick of sense. The fans know it. The media knows it. And the rest of the NFL universe knows it. There's issues with George Pickens and this Steelers team right now. Off the field issues. You know, when does it make sense for you as a coach to let a player walk out for a football game on the eye black and it says clear as day, you saw it on WTOV 9, always expletive open. The expletive started with F, not a word appropriate for television, for a TV audience, for what the NFL is trying to put out there. I'm sure Roger Goodell wasn't happy that, you know, one of the most dynamic players in your game on national television that you're going to be seeing on TV a lot. Every time you see him on TV, he's got a swear word on his face and you can see it plain as day. Where's the discipline? And I think you saw it, but don't, you know, pour water on my head out of a bucket and tell me it's raining. Don't tell me that. To put it kindly, you guys know the expression I'm trying to get. There's an issue with George Pickens, and we'll keep an eye on the story as it develops. One of the other things that threw me off post-game, and I was there, I covered the game. Justin Fields spoke afterwards and started talking about what the identity of the offense is and said, I believe we know our identity, and was asked, Justin, what is the identity? This one made me react like, you know, the gif of the guy that goes like that, and you're like, whoa. That was my reaction to this post game against the Cowboys. Justin Fields on what the identity of the Steelers offense is.
Justin, do you feel like this offense knows what its identity is or has its identity right now, or do you think that's still forming?
No, I think we have our identity.
What is that identity?
What are the identity options in football? I've never heard of a team having an identity. I think we have an identity. I just don't know, you know, what it is. Like, I never heard necessarily an option for, you know, an identity. I think we ran the ball well today. Like I said, I think we just missed shots and, you know, shot ourselves in the foot again. So, you know, I don't think, you know, we're one of those teams looking for identity. I think we know who we are. You know, we're a team that, you know, predicates on, you know, running the football and staying on schedule on first and second down, and then executing on third down. But we just didn't, you know, get the job done. So I don't know the word to, you know, necessarily label the identity, but those are some, you know, intangibles and characteristics of, you know, who we are as an offense.
When the quarterback that has started for you for the first 5 games of the season has a problem with correctly identifying the identity of the offense he's quarterbacking, should be concerning. The identity of the Steelers offense should be what Fields said at the end: running the football, utilizing the play action, and executing on third down. They haven't been able to run the football. They've had Guess how many explosive plays off of play action this year? Goose egg. The one that Connor Hayward wasn't able to come up with in the first half against the Cowboys should have been one. I think Hayward should have came down with that football. Was the ball slightly overthrown by Fields? Yes, but that's more on Hayward, if you ask me, than it is Fields. And the identity of the offense should be somewhat George Pickens. Like, the identity of an offense, if you ask me, is players too. The identity of the Chiefs offense, Patrick Mahomes. Now, the Steelers don't have anybody that dynamic like the Ravens. The identity of their offense is Lamar Jackson and being able to run the football with him, Derrick Henry, and being able to make things happen with a mobile quarterback. The identity of the Browns offense is, well, it was being able to run the football better than anybody with a great offensive line and one of, if not the best running backs in football in Nick Chubb, who unfortunately isn't playing right now because he had almost a career-ending injury a season ago. Identity of the Bengals. Great quarterback, accurate quarterback, dynamic wide receivers. Like, I can go on and on about some of the identities of NFL teams and especially their offenses. And maybe I might struggle with some, but guess who those teams are that I might have to sit there and think about trying to summarize their offensive identities? Bad ones, not playoff teams. And, for the starting quarterback of the Steelers to not be able to identify what this team's identity is or describe it right away should raise some concerns. I'll tell you what the Steelers' identity is. Told you before the Trinity timeout. Mike Tomlin has loved winning football games by de-emphasizing the importance of having good quarterback play. Don't turn the football over. Run the ball, be boring, and rely on your defense to be the splash, to be dynamic, and to make big plays, to create those explosive moments in games to win. And sometimes it doesn't work. Sometimes the defense has a bad night. Sometimes the defense lets the opposition convert on third down 2/3 of the time, like it did on Sunday against the Cowboys. And if you run into, and Mike Tomlin said this post game, you run into a good quarterback, Dak Prescott's a good one. You expect good quarterbacks to win close football games if they have the football last. How many more good quarterbacks did the Steelers play this year? Lamar Jackson twice, Joe Burrow twice, Jalen Hurts, Patrick Mahomes, Jaden Daniels in Washington has been one of the best quarterbacks in the league despite being a rookie. Aaron Rodgers, I named 8 games? Baltimore twice, that's 2. Cincinnati twice, 4. Daniels, Rodgers, Mahomes, Hurts. 8 games remaining on the Steelers' schedule where they'll have the better quarterback, at least, and that's just totally off the cuff of my brain. Where the Steelers won't have the better quarterback, the opposition will. And if you like being in close football games, Mike, if you like being in grounded out football games where it's going to be more often than not a one-possession contest deep into the fourth quarter and you don't have the football last, you're going to lose. Steelers have already lost twice. They have 8 more games that we just talked about, which I just mentioned. Comes down to it. They could lose all 8 of those games and have 10 losses, and boom, it's a losing season. So maybe it's time to rethink how you play the game and how you try to attack a football game offensively. And I digress. It's the Steelers and the Las Vegas Raiders on Sunday, 4:05 in Vegas. I will be there, taking a little time off, heading out to the Sin City to enjoy the game. AFC North standings are scrolling at the bottom of your screen, as are the next matchups for teams in the area, both in the NFL And in college, you can watch the Browns and the Eagles live on Fox 9, 1 p.m. Sunday. And then the Cincinnati Bengals, New York Giants on WTOV 9 Sunday Night Football this week as well. We're able to watch Ohio State and West Virginia on our networks this weekend as well. West Virginia taking on a matchup on Fox 9 this week at home against Iowa State, one of the better teams in the Big 12 and in the country. And then you see it right now on your screen, Ohio State and Oregon, 7:30 Saturday on WTOV 9. It's number 2 versus number 3. So great football on our networks this weekend, college and the pros. Hope you can join us for it. This has been Jacked Up live on the WTOV 9 YouTube channel. Thanks for joining us. We'll talk to you again next week.